I found this public piano, but it needs serious help. Nearly every single key is sticking and the piano is severely out of tune. I wasn't sure if I would be able to fix it, but I figured it's worth a try. So I got in contact with the guy who owns the piano and asked him if I could tune it and repair it for free. He was super excited. He said people used to play this piano all the time, but recently nobody has been because of its condition. I started by fixing the sticky keys with a few different methods. The whole process took me around an hour and a half, and I was nervous the whole time because I did not want to have to go back and tell the owner that this piano would have to be thrown out. Sure enough, I put everything back together, but not a single key was sticking. I was super happy about this one, and in a second you can see the full before and after of the piano. It's kind of crazy because it was really out of tune and the keys were sticking really bad, but here it is. A lady called to get her piano tuned, but what I found inside nearly brought her to tears. You see, the owner inherited this piano from her sister, who passed away not too long ago, and some of the papers inside were from a campground her sister used to own. When I showed them to the owner, she was hit with a wave of nostalgia. Even though it's not the nicest piano in the world, the memories it holds are priceless to her. It just goes to show that owning the most expensive things doesn't matter, it's the memories that count. Someone called me and said, my piano is way out of tune and one of my keys are broken. But when I got there, I found out just how bad the situation was. This piano hadn't been tuned since it was made, over 30 years ago. For context, piano manufacturers recommend pianos are tuned at least once a year. I'll show you how much better the piano sounds in a bit, but for now, we need to clean out the inside. The board covering the keys acts like a little slide, and kids have a lot of fun sending their favorite toys down into the piano. Pro tip, this is the first thing I check for when I find a sticky key. Just open up the lid and make sure nothing is clogging your system. With that finished up, we need to unscrew this wood piece that holds all the keys in place. From here, it's just as simple as sand it down, grab some glue, apply sparingly, and clamp and let it dry. I basically had to tune the piano 3 times because, as you'll hear in a second, it was really far out of tune. It worked out well though because the glue on the new key had some time to dry. Without further ado, here's a before and after of the whole piano. When I first got to this customer's house, I thought this would be a pretty standard service call, but by the end, I had nearly this entire piano taken apart. Stick around because it is so cool to see how much actually goes on behind the scenes whenever you press a key. You can see in a second that there's a problem with this hammer and it's bouncing 2 or 3 times against the strings. It's kind of hard to tell over the camera, but in person it is very annoying to try and play a piano like this. And that whole problem with the hammer has to do with what's called a spring cord right here. And you can see that I just pulled it off super easily. That is not supposed to happen normally because that spring cord is supposed to hold the hammer in place and help it return back to its normal spot. You're supposed to be able to pull on it very strongly and it should resist the tension and not just fall off. And that problem is going on with every single one of the keys, so I'm going to take it back to my house and fix it. First, I need to blow out all the dust because it's really dirty. The cause of this whole problem actually stems back to a manufacturing defect that Yamaha had for a bunch of their pianos, but normally they make really solid pianos. I just think that they should have done some sort of manufacturing recall on these because it can be pretty expensive to fix. So anyway, I'm going to have to take off all of these hammers here so that we can actually get to those what's called spring cords. And yeah, so basically a lot of piano work is just doing the same thing 88 times, so you'll see me time lapse a lot of things here after I do it once. You can see there's a lot going on inside of the piano that you don't normally see, and it's kind of cool to have it all taken apart. That way you can see all of the mechanisms and stuff inside of there. But anyway, I need to tip it over and turn it around. That way we can get a better look at what's going on right here with the broken spring cords. And you can see I'm just pulling these spring cords right off. That should not happen at all if they're in good condition, but these are not in good condition, so we're going to need to replace each one of them. So right now I'm scraping out the remnants of the old cords, that way we can insert some new ones in their place. And actually this is one of the most satisfying parts. I just need to do this all the way across the piano. The technical term for this mechanism that I'm working on right now is called the piano action. From there, I'm going to grab some fishing line. I know fishing line seems kind of random, but trust me, this is how it's done. And then I grab some glue to fill up a syringe. Now that we've got everything set and ready to go, it's time to insert some new spring cords. So the first step is to add some glue and then push in that fishing line, let it dry for a little bit. You can see it's actually really nice and sturdy. The fishing line fits really well. Then from there, I loop it around and glue in the other side, measure it, make sure it's the right length. And after that one dries, it will be ready to go. Now we just repeat the same process 88 times. And in this video, you can see there's a second person. I actually grabbed my little brother to help me out with this part. I think the whole project took us around maybe 8 hours or so. But anyway, now that I have the new pieces installed, it's time to put everything back together. And in a second, you can see I grab this spring right here, and I'll move it down and engage it with the new spring cord. All of that work was to get the hammer functioning like it should. Again, I just do the same thing 88 times, put it all back together, then we can install the hammer rest rail. Then we put the action back in the piano, and you can see what it was like before. The hammer would kind of bounce 2 or 3 times against the string, but now the hammers are functioning like they should, and this piano should be a lot more fun to play in the future. I got a weird call from a customer. They said, I need my piano tuned and I have a dropped key inside of the piano. Now, I've heard of keys being sticky or broken, but I've never heard of a dropped key. And to be honest, I was a bit nervous going into the appointment. When I got there and started taking everything apart though, I realized they were talking about a real key, like a house key. They accidentally dropped it inside of the piano and needed it back. After I returned it to the customer, I noticed this piano was kind of dirty, but they said they couldn't afford the $100 to get it deep cleaned right now. So I told them, you know what? I've got everything taken apart. I'll just go ahead and clean it for free. But as I was tuning, I ran across a problem with this note. It just wasn't quite playing every time you pressed the key. So I took the action back out of the piano, and sure enough, this hammer is not moving as much as it should. Now, you can see these pieces are moving nice and smooth. Those are good, but the problem note is moving really slow and sticking in place. To fix that, I'm going to grab some of my handy oil, squirt a little bit on the hinge point, and let's see if that worked. Yep, that smoothened it right up. Now I just checked to make sure the hammer is moving like it should, put everything back together for the final test, and this piano is good to go. Even if you think your piano is clean, this is probably what it looks like. So I was working on this piano today, but as soon as I opened it up, I could tell there would be dirt and garbage hidden everywhere. I took out the guts of the piano and blew off all the dust. Trust me when I say this is the cleanest part, but it needs to be done so we don't have any dust clogging up the joints and making sticky keys. Next, I had to take out this wood piece so I could get all the keys out. You're probably thinking I picked the dirtiest piano to give as an example, but this is way more common than you might think. It's so easy to drop coins, hairpins, and lots of dirt between the keys. So if you ever have little kids around your piano, make sure they know not to put things between the keys or else they won't work right. If you're like most people, you probably have a person that comes to mind when you think of piano. If you think they might find this video helpful or interesting, share it with them. Someone called me the other day and said, my piano is way out of tune and there are a couple keys that aren't quite working right. So I went over there to help him out. Right away, I knew what the first problem was on this key. I had to take out this little wood piece so that I could get to it. You can see that it's cracked right here. That's definitely not supposed to be there. So I thought I would glue it, clamp it, and put it back in. There was some garbage in this piano too, so I thought I would grab that. The next note is still sounding even though you're done playing the key. So let's take out the damper. That is way looser than it should be. Just like the other key here, step 1 is grab some glue. Step 2, insert it. 3, clamp it for a couple of minutes. And 5, reinsert. There was a loose tuning pin causing this note to be really far out of tune, so I pounded it and brought it up a pitch. I repeated this same tuning process 236 times. Here's a before and after of the whole piano. A local high school called to get their piano tuned, but when I got there, I found this problem with one of the keys. 2 of the notes were playing, even though I was only pressing 1. The piano was in a band class, and it must have been really annoying every time the pianist played that note. To fix this, I needed a better look at what was going on inside of the piano. If you look closely, you can see these hammers are actually rubbing against each other. Step 1 to fix this is to loosen the screw. Step 2 is to adjust the hammer to the proper position, and 3, retighten the screw. While I was at it, there were a bunch of other notes with the same problem, so I went ahead and fixed those. With that finished up, we can put everything back together and check to see if it's working, and just like that, another piano is done. Someone called me and said, I need my piano tuned and one of my keys are broken. They told me they got the piano for free, so I figured it would be in pretty rough shape. Side note, don't pick up a free piano until you've had a piano tuner take a look at it. Often they have problems that are very expensive to fix. In general, my advice is to stay away from free pianos and save up a few $100s to get a nice used one. Anyway, if you take a look under the piano, you can see this piece is obviously broken. Luckily, they're pretty easy to replace. First, we need to break off this old piece. This part is always the most satisfying. Second, we need to grab the new piece, insert the old lifter wire, and screw it on. It's ready to go back in the piano after I carefully remove the rest of the old one. The 4th step is to drop it in, and 5, just clip it on. Once you've done that, it's as good as new. I told the owner that more of these would likely break soon, but he said it wasn't a problem since they barely played. I tuned this piano nearly 3 times so that I would actually stay in tune. Here's a before and after of the whole piano. I really messed up. A customer called to get their church's piano tuned. They had a recital coming up that weekend, and they wanted to make sure the piano sounded its best. It was going pretty well, but I needed to pull out the action of the piano to check on something. I made sure everything was safe, but as I was pulling it out, my hand bumped one of the keys and I heard this sound. As soon as I heard it crack, my stomach dropped because I knew exactly what just happened. The key that I bumped while pulling out the action made this hammer break off. My mentor told me that most piano tuners make this mistake once in their life, and because they learned the hard way, they don't do it again. To be honest, I didn't really believe him until today. Anyway, we need to get out the broken wood from inside the hammer, so I grab my heat gun, warm up the glue, and pop out the old piece of wood. Then I grab some glue. There's a couple different types that you can use for this, but I almost always have wood glue out in the field. From there, I put on the new hammer, clip off the top, and sand the rest so it's flush. After checking to make sure that hammer lines up with the others, it's ready to go. And don't worry, I didn't charge the customer anything for this because YouTube probably won't show this video to many people. And to be honest, I might lose a lot of followers for what I'm going to say at the end. But lately I've been thinking, what if this is the last of my videos you ever get the chance to see? I know it's morbid, but stay with me. People of all ages die from car accidents, heart attacks, and cancer every single minute. That means out of the millions of people watching my videos, one of you will probably die before I make my next one. So that gives me one chance to ask you this question. Where do we go when we die? Now, I know what I believe as a Christian, but my goal in this 38-second video isn't to try and persuade you one way or another. Instead, if this piqued your interest, please don't just keep scrolling. There are answers out there. The most common question I get asked on the job has an answer that surprises a lot of people. The question, how often should a piano be tuned? Now, before I give the answer and somebody in the comments says, pianos don't really need to be tuned that often, you're just saying that so you can charge more money. Don't worry, this isn't just my opinion, it's backed up by piano manufacturers. That reminds me, getting a piano tuned is kind of like changing the oil in a car. You know how you need to change your car's oil every few thousand miles? Well, a piano is a machine, and in order to last longer and play better, it also needs to be regularly maintained. Sadly, most people wait a few years until they can hear the piano is out of tune and then call a tuner, but that's really not good for the piano. You see, even though a lot of people can't hear it, a piano's pitch changes by about 5% every year. The longer the wait, the harder it becomes to get a good tuning. That's why manufacturers recommend tuning every 6 months or a bare minimum of once a year. This piano has a really weird problem, and it belongs to a YouTuber with over 1 million subscribers. So I'm going to try fixing it, and at the end I'll reveal who the owner is and we'll see if he likes it. Okay, before I show you what the problem is, we need a bit of context. When I first got to the owner's house, he told me that some of the keys sounded weird, but I said, don't worry, I run into stuff like this all the time. It shouldn't take very long, so I'll just get to it later once I'm done cleaning the piano. At the time though, I did not realize how difficult and yet annoyingly simple this problem was going to be. After I was done cleaning, I put everything back together, but that's when I found the weird problem. A ton of the notes made a really loud buzzing sound every time you played them. I spent the next 45 minutes trying to figure out what was going on, but I couldn't find anything. I was about to give up, but that's when I found this. Something really small was stuck under the gold-colored plate of the piano. Come to find out, it was part of a string that broke a long time ago. And when I took it out, there was no more buzzing. Now all there is left to do is tune the piano and show it to the owner to see what he thinks, and he thought it was great. I got a call from another customer asking if she could get her piano tuned. She was an older lady and said, I just started getting voice therapy and I'm supposed to use my piano, but it sounds awful. Before I even started tuning, I found a serious problem. Some of these hammers are slamming against the strings instead of gently bouncing off. So I searched for a minute and found that this thing right here was loose. It's called a let-off rail, and if you don't have it tightened down, then you'll have a lot of problems. After I got it set in place, all of the keys on the piano were working, or so I thought. I found a note where the hammer was out of place and rubbing the one next to it, making it impossible to play. So I went ahead and fixed that. After I was done tuning, I hid a secret camera to catch the owner's reaction when I told her I wanted to do everything for free. You can see her reaction in a second, but first the before and after of the entire piano.
I just don't know what to say. Thank you.
This is probably the most out of tune piano you'll ever hear. I asked the owner what made it go so far out of tune, and she told me this story. This piano was neglected by the original owner of the house. They bought it just as a piece of decoration. No one ever really played it, and they never had it tuned. The new owner bought the house, and the piano came with it. But when they sat down to play it, they immediately noticed how awful it sounded. They wanted the piano tuned though, so their son actually tried to tune it himself. Even though the tuning was messed up quite a bit, it showed how much they cared for the piano. I'm just glad that some of the strings didn't snap while he was tuning, because because some of them were way tighter than they should be. Eventually they called me and I came over to help them out. Here's a before and after of the entire piano. I was scared to start a business at 17 years old. I remember the first real customer I had. My worst fear came true when they asked me, "How old are you?" And my pimple-faced, voice-cracking self had to tell them the truth. I felt so out of place, like I should just go home and work a regular job. But when I told them I was only 17, I didn't get the reaction I was expecting. I find most people think it's cool I started so young and actually encourage. Even if I don't have the answers all the time, they're really forgiving if I say, "I'll need to check with my mentor on that," or "I'll get back with you as soon as possible." Look, as long as you work hard, treat people well, and are willing to learn, you could start your own business too. Sure, I love pianos, but part of the reason I make these videos is to inspire people to find a job doing what they love, regardless of their age. Because believe me, this is a public piano, and today I'm going to fix it for free. The piano is across the street from a local middle school, and the story behind how it got here is actually pretty cool. See, it used to be listed online as a free piano, but there are so many free pianos already out there, and the previous owner was having a hard time even just giving it away. So they were planning on trashing it, but that's when something really cool happened. See, there's this guy in the area that saves these old pianos and sets them up to be painted and placed in popular spots around town. Well, this one was painted by the middle schoolers as a class art project and was placed right across the street. And the before and after of the whole piano is coming up, but real quick, I've had a ton of you guys ask how to tune and repair pianos yourself, so if you're interested in that, there's a link on my profile where you can learn more. Okay, here's the before and after.